Our family lived in a middle-class suburb in Northern Ireland where Ian was a general practitioner. We were committed Christians, belonged to a lively church community, and were very involved in all the church activities. There came a time though when we asked ourselves where we were going in life, how our lives impacted people around us. We wanted to serve God meaningfully, but we weren't sure how different we were to anyone else. We had always talked about the possibility of doing missionary work right since our university days, but the opportunity never seemed to arise. And it wasn't until 1987, when Ian had an opportunity to visit Uganda, that we felt God challenging us to leave our comfortable lifestyle and go to Uganda to embark on a medical work. So it was in January 1988 that we found ourselves in Uganda. Our children were then aged 11, 9 and 8. The radical change from suburbia to the African bush was a very difficult one, particularly for me. We started the medical work with virtually nothing. Ian immediately began to train health workers. We then started some curative work, and our first clinic was under a tree outside our house. Later on, we started some clinics on the steps of a church about 3 miles from where we lived. A few months after we arrived in Uganda, we had a visit from some very dear friends of ours, John and Barbara Kelly. Barbara in particular had always wanted to visit Uganda, and she was very deeply moved by what she saw here and really loved the people that she met. Tragically, 1 week after she left Uganda and returned to Ireland, she died very suddenly. It was decided to start a memorial fund for her, and out of that seed money there came about what ultimately became the hospital. Out of the tragedy of the loss of a very dear friend came a symbol of life and hope in this community.
The hospital is in a rural area, and consequently most of the people in this area don't have much cash, so we can't charge high fees. Even with the fees that we charge, sometimes the people can't pay. So we're trying several schemes to improve community development and also to develop income for the hospital. One of these schemes is a maize mill. The local people bring their corn, their maize to be ground, and we grind it for them for a fee. This helps them because there's no other maize mill in the area, and it also helps the hospital because it produces a little income. Another scheme that we have is hiring out a tractor for ploughing. Many of the people have small plots, about an acre or so, and we will plough them for them, again for a fee. We have also a workshop at the hospital where we make the window frames and the door frames and the furniture, and we also can do some small contracts for outside. The biggest scheme that we have for income generation and community development is a hospital farm. This farm is 75 acres, and we have about 30 cattle on the farm at present. What we are doing is using a Frisian bull to upgrade the local cattle to produce crossbred Frisians, which produce much more milk than the normal local cattle here. We have a village bull scheme whereby the bull is available to service the cows of local farmers. But we ourselves are also trying to upgrade our herd so that we can produce enough milk that makes it a commercial dairy farm.
When I first came to Kiwoko, the laboratory facilities were non-existent, except for the few things I brought with me, like a microscope, a stain for tuberculosis, and a gram stain, a general bacterial stain. The first lab test I did was a TB test. This involves having a loop, taking a bit of sputa and putting it on a slide and staining it, looking for the TB organisms. I made a loop by just wrapping some wires around pencils and then flaming the loop to sterilize it in the flame of a gas cooker. Then I made the slide and stained it in the kitchen sink. Amazingly, it worked. The test was positive, and I was so excited that it had worked, I ran upstairs to tell Ian and Roberta. Only upon reaching their doorway did I remember that this was unfortunate news for the patient. Now we have many more pieces of equipment in the lab, and we can offer a wider range of tests, including blood transfusions and chemistries. Much of our equipment was donated to us by universities and one commercial lab in California. We now also have a laboratory training school. This is a nationally recognized program, and when the students complete the course, they are eligible to take an examination. And if they pass, they will be granted a national certificate as a laboratory assistant. One thing I really value about the work I do here is the teaching of the Ugandan students. If you do a lab test 100 times, it can become a bit tedious. But teaching and watching the students' eyes light up with understanding is really rewarding. Also, I'm really glad to be able to share a practical skill I might have that will enable, the training will enable the students to have a profession and earn a living at something that is very worthwhile and needed in this community.
I arrived 6 months after the Clarkes had started their work in Kabupu and a tree. I had been working in the Prime Minister's private hospital in Kampala when Ian approached me and asked if I could work with him. Well, I prayed about it and felt I should leave the work in the city and come and work with the sick in Luero Bush with Ian. I enjoy talking to patients and giving them a word of love and encouragement. I'm proud of being part of its beginning, and now see it grow a large hospital serving many patients in the country. I myself am in charge of outpatient department, which distributes medicines to patients who don't stay in the hospital. We have many gynecological services which should be mentioned. We have a maternity ward, of course. We have prenatal clinics which educate, examine, and treat mothers. We have a nutritional ward where we treat children who are sick from malnourishment and teach mothers healthy feeding. We health educate traditional birth attendants, how to handle a mother and a baby, and what to do in a childbirth emergencies. Then they can go back in their villages and serve in their areas.
It was in 1990, the day after Christmas, that the father brought this newborn baby to the hospital. The baby had badly clubbed feet, and the mother had died in childbirth just along the dirt road. The father asked us to look after the baby while he made some arrangements back home for his care. But although he returned 1 week later, he still hadn't made provision for the baby. So in fact, the baby was abandoned and we had to look after him at the hospital. The nurses really cared for him and looked after him, and they called him Moses because he'd been born at the swamp along the dirt road. He had 2 operations to fix his clubbed feet, and now with the help of little orthopedic boots, Moses can walk really quite well. For the first 2 years of his life, he lived on the maternity ward, and in fact his very first word was the word push, because that was the word that he heard most often in the labour ward. At present he's living with one of the nurses, and we hope that ultimately we can find a Ugandan family to look after him. We believe that God has a purpose and a plan for this little boy, and he's very much loved by all the people at the hospital.
In Kiwoko Hospital, we run an outpatients clinic supported by an excellent laboratory service. We as well have mobile clinics to reach out to people who are far away from us. We have a well-developed community-based healthcare system thanks to our locally trained community health workers. We can therefore monitor, for instance, tuberculosis in the whole district. Our inpatient services are provided in 5 main wards, namely maternity ward, the general ward which takes care of both the women and children, the male ward, a tuberculosis ward, and a nutritional rehabilitation ward. All in all, we have about 100 beds in these wards. We as well have a theater that does up to close to 1,000 operations per year. I think this hospital reaches the patients in a special way. My mind goes to Nakato, a patient who is currently in our nutritional ward. She was brought to us by our community health workers with a progressively wasting disease, which we have diagnosed as scleroderma. Because of her social circumstances, the hospital decided to take care of Nakato. The most gratifying thing is that her pitiful face has changed. She's now full of joy and looks beyond herself. She is a challenge and an encouragement to most of our patients. Personally, my vision is to work not only with the patients, but as well with the staff. I believe that in one-to-one Bible study, the staff can be developed to minister more effectively to the patients.
In the hospital, we've been working with AIDS patients for the past 3 to 4 years. In Uganda, about 15% of the adult population are HIV positive. The distressing thing is to see so many young people die, people from the age of 18 upwards. We have initiatives to deal with AIDS in the community. We do health education, we take a video out to schools and communities, we answer their questions about AIDS. We go out to homes and we offer help or compassion or medicines or food or blankets, and we have a counselling program in the hospital. However, all these programs are our initiatives into the community, and it has really struck me forcibly over the last 3 to 4 years that there isn't much initiative coming from the community itself. So recently we have initiated a program to try and bring about a community response. What this has involved is simply going out and talking to the community. Every week we would go out with maybe 15 or 16 people. We would go out to a village, we would gather the people together, and we would sit down and have discussion groups. And in those discussion groups, people themselves would tell us the problems with AIDS, they would tell us their traditions, their marriage practices, and they themselves would begin to articulate the problems and maybe begin to get more insight themselves into those problems. The people have been very welcoming and very encouraged that we've come to talk to them. And we hope by this process that they themselves will, as they gain more insight, begin to offer solutions, begin to ask for help, begin to respond themselves. This is a Christian hospital, and we want to keep Christ at the centre of the hospital. It's very easy in a medical institution to get caught up in all the busyness of the medical care of the patients. But it's very important that Christ is kept at the centre. So every morning we meet for prayers. At prayers we have some singing, some hymns, some choruses, sharing from the Bible, and some prayers. We have once per week an informal fellowship with the staff where we can come together and just share more informally. And then on Sundays we have an open air service right on the veranda of the hospital where the patients, those who can come, the attendants, the staff, those from round about, everyone can come together, and we have a time, we have a service together, and we can really declare what the hospital is about at that time.